Hello, good morning. We are here for the second lecture on management, module 1. So, what I plan for today is to give a brief overview of what are the skills needed by a manager, how are management and administration different, is management a science or an art? After a brief recap of what constitutes the nature of management, what do managers do, their functions, levels and roles of managers. So what we have here is a classic example, definitions by various people. The first one we start is by the classic definition, the art of getting things done through people. So I have colored the three elements there. So one, she opines it's an art, then it's an activity, and then she says about the people who get the work done. So George Terry sees many more dimensions here and says that there is a process. There are definite functions that are marked in green, okay, and the action of performing is directed towards a certain objective, accomplishing objectives, okay. And how does one do that? Two components, people and resources, okay. So he identifies basically four activities: planning, organizing, actuating and controlling. So not satisfied with George Terry, Coons and O'Donnell much later they revised the definition, telling that it is the direction and maintenance of internal environment in an enterprise where individuals working in groups can perform efficiently and effectively towards attaining group goals. So the functions they identify are many, and the key here they feel, okay, that management does is basically try to increase in efficiency as well as effectivity, okay, and all this is focused towards attaining group goals. So there is one very essential part in management, and almost all the activities are directed towards that, and that is being able to make decisions at various levels and at various sequences in the process of management, as well as using these decisions to actuate, lead, or activate things. So, Donald Clough has rightly identified this. So, going on to the next aspect here. So, we have discussed this in detail before, but it would really not harm going through that again. So, what exactly constitutes management? Management is done in the functions that the managers actually discharge. The first and foremost activity in management is planning. In a single sentence, one can say that planning is nothing but thinking before doing. It is the preparation for action. So, the actions that involves planning are all about deciding what, where, when, why, who and how for each activity that is to be done. So planning is involved with formulation of policies and procedures so that the objectives of the organization can be achieved more efficiently. It anticipates and analyzes all the difficulties that are encountered in running the business and decides in advance how these things can be overcome. planning is a rational, economic, systematic way of making decisions, and it helps in optimal use of resources that are available. So without planning, the activities may be totally confused, done in a very diffused way, which may be very haphazard and totally ineffective, right? So I would like to tell at this point that there's a nice adage that goes like this: failing to plan is planning to fail. So planning is getting ready today to do something tomorrow. The three key parts in planning is basically selecting goals for the organization or the group, establishing these goals for every subunit or department that is there, and after establishing, basically chalk out how these goals can be achieved, okay, in a very systematic manner. So these three steps are in a nutshell what planning um, entails. So once the planning is done, the next activity that's left for the manager is to decide. So this is a very central activity, and it is actually not exactly uh, a part of planning. Decision making is weaved into almost all the other functions as well, but the majority or the major it is majorly embedded or inherent in planning. Okay, so all these three came together, but organizing is the next activity. So what does organizing entail? It is the process of arranging and distributing the planned work. Okay, how does one distribute the authority, the resources among organization members, etc., such that the goals can be achieved. So if one were to check out the steps that are involved, or what uh, explain what is organization, it would be to determine all the activities required to achieve group goals. Uh, dividing the group and also the activities that are to be taken up. Thirdly, selecting the people who are right based on their competencies. After one defines what exactly is going to be needed to be done and their responsibilities. Lastly, um, organizing is about giving people enough authority to carry out their responsibilities. So it is basically establishing relationship between people, work, resources, and then coordinating these factors in such a way that the maximum output can be obtained with minimal cost. So planning refers to what the management wants to do. Organizing means providing the right platform to achieve this particular plan that's been chalked out. So planning was on paper, organizing is still on paper. The key elements here, okay, that come into action are staffing and coordinating. So staffing is basically recruiting people, selecting the best, those that are best suited based on their competency, and so on and so forth. So coordination, before I come to coordination, staffing is just not about taking in the right people, but also training them such that if they're not competent enough to take up the job, how could they be risen to the platform, and develop them over a period of time into people who are capable of taking other roles in the company. And it also involves basically thinking of how to remunerate the people who've been taken up. So coordination is an activity wherein you have different departments who will take different activities, but all in all the idea is to attain group goals. So how that is being carried out with minimal use of resources and in the shortest possible time. So that's about coordination. The central element in almost all management activities is leading. So leading constitutes again communicating, motivating, and actuating. So the essential idea that the founder or the manager, somebody at the top, has in his mind a planned drafted. It needs to be carried out by not him but some other people. So how is it done? So it's basically by communicating his ideas, right? So and while communicating, there is no motivation for the people to take up or to enact these goals given for him or for the group. So how does one actually get this going? How does one actually actuate or activate these processes? So these are functions that involve leading. So controlling basically involves measuring the performance um, against a given standard. Okay, here it is the goals. So when one measures against goals, what next? So basically, why do we do this? By doing this, we understand how far we are from achieving these, or how close we are in achieving this, what corrective measures can be taken, etc. Right? So controlling spans operations like like compliance. So how to go ahead? So basically it involves if I were to put it down in steps, four steps: establishing a standard, measuring the actual performance, comparing it with the comparing the actual performance with the established standard. Then if there is any deviation, take corrective actions if necessary, and then proceed. So it is just not enough if a manager is able to do the four numbered like functions over here. As we know, management involves a lot more. uh, there is a differentiator here, okay, and that's the one that's displayed there: innovation. So what constitutes this? So why do we need to do this? So basically it's how one organization differs from the other. So innovation is the key, as is representation. So representation and innovation are two additional functions put in. So basically these are the six functions. Let's just see what each one entails. So basically, as I told, management means planning involves defining the objectives. So objectives can be written as chalked down as the vision, mission. How does one actually go about doing those objectives? So objectives is a very light term. Vision are something that is there for a long term evolution of the company. How to strategize, how to chalk out a plan of action to achieve goals. Then decision making, of course. Organizing involves formulation of organization structure, allocating resources, designing the jobs. And staffing, mainly it's about manpower planning, recruiting, selecting people, placing them into the right places or jobs, training and developing the personnel, deciding on the remuneration, promoting them, and then transferring them to right locations. So leading and directing involves communicating, coordinating activities, motivating people to start new things, actuating or activating. So these are necessary when one takes up the role of an entrepreneur. So as I told, controlling involves establishing standards, reviewing individuals and processes, taking corrective actions how and when necessary. In addition to innovation and representation, the functions that need to be carried out are budgeting and forecasting, which are essential. So this is an assignment that I feel that you would be benefiting from, just identifying what are the functions performed at by a bank manager. Okay, so other than routine operation. So having a look at that again, what we see was the so what we see here is the characteristics of management, right? So it's the same points again, but we see there are few extra words here. So a factor of production and decision making, and we see that the last three words, a career, profession and discipline, these are new entries here. So all these characterize or typify management, which cannot be just told as a process or an activity or a body of people, right? So the next is the various levels in management. So I identify a pyramid. Okay, three portions in a pyramid: the top and the base and the middle portion. So the levels in management that I usually see uh, at the top portion of management are presidents, executive officers, uh, vice presidents, etc. And below them, subordinate to them, are chief engineers, divisional managers or leads, regional managers, etc. And at the forefront, usually leading the battalion, are like soldiers. I mean, people who manage the frontline workers, as in foremen, supervisors, section chief. So these are first line managers. So we have the top level management involved in determining goals and objectives for the whole organization, or the focusing on one key area. And they do this for the whole organization. uh, what would be the end points of organizing what after that? So that question is basically thought of in advance, and chalked out by these people, and they try to integrate the organization with the outside environment, balancing the interest groups, and are these are the people who are responsible for the results. Middle managers establish the programs for the departments which they head, and achieving the specific goals given to them by the top level management. They train and develop their employees and integrate different parts of the department as in a holistic way, such that all of them collectively work towards the group goals. Okay, the first line managers or the supervisory managers basically are concerned, they are more technically proficient, and they are bothered about being efficient in their use of resources. So they are basically the executors of policies and procedures, making series of decisions with well defined and specified assumptions. Okay, so these are the activities that are carried out by managers. So what are the skills that managers need to have in order to uh, execute these? So three types of skills are thought of: technical, wherein it's the core competency of that a person needs to have in order to be eligible for the job, be it engineering, accounting, etc. Interpersonal, the people skills. This relates to dealing with others, being able to lead, motivate, or control people. And most important, the conceptual skills. So what does that entail? It's an ability to discern, or to basically um, conceptualize things, as in determine whether factors would contribute to the organization succeeding or failing at in different dimensions. Okay, so if I were to attribute technical, interpersonal and conceptual skills to the three levels of management, lower level or supervisory management would need a lot more technical skill than conceptual skills, a minimal amount of the conceptual skill. but a lot more technical skills than interpersonal skills. Mid-level management needs to be proficient with all the three, but again, they would be much more dependent on their interpersonal skills. And top level management is, of course, attributed with conceptual skills and a modicum amount of interpersonal skills and technical skills. So they are known for being able to discern between things. So we have the roles that a manager actually takes up, and this was given by Henry Mintzberg. He identified three bins, okay, interpersonal, informational, and decisional, under which there are three, approximately three each roles that a manager takes up. So let me just, yeah, this is a better illustration of the functions that a manager carries out. Basically, here we have a manager acting as a figurehead, a leader, or a person who liaises, okay, under in interpersonal roles. So here, basically, all these three roles, they uh, take in, or rather, the information is carried out from these entities as, or rather, manager as these entities, and provided to the other two bins based on the feedback, right? So manager in an informational role needs to monitor the activities that people are taking up in his department or in his section, and also be able to control the information that is passing through within the organization as a disseminator. And as a spokesperson, he is basically involved in sending out the information to the outside world after a due process of the information that's being gathered and a lot of discerning activity. His discretion again is very critical in decisional roles, and as an entrepreneur he actuates or starts things, and as a disturbance handler, basically he's involved in maintaining normalcy within the organization. So organization as an entity doesn't function alone. It is a part of the environment. So from the outside he gets the resources, be it time, or I mean manages the resources, be it time or other physical entities needed, and does an equitable distribution of these among the personnel involved. So in this role he is a resource allocator. A negotiator's task is very a difficult one, wherein there is mitigation of conflicts that arise and how it's actually taken up, not necessarily within the organization but even outside of the organization. So these are the roles taken up as per Henry Milsberg. So what does interpersonal role involve? Okay, as an interpersonal role, a manager is a figurehead or a leader, um, or a liaiser, okay, a person who liaises. So as a figurehead, basically he needs to attend functions representing the organization, or leading and motivating subordinates, or connecting between organizations and the outside world. So these are the roles involved in interpersonal role when he's in interpersonal role discharging. So the informational roles basically involves communication, as I said. So monitoring of information, and who and how it is passed on, and how it affects his activities is basically done by a monitor. A disseminator basically sees to it that privileged or classified information is passed on to people who are the actual people who discharge it, and not the others. And as a spokesperson he represents his organization and to the outside world. It can be customers, suppliers, anybody who is a stakeholder. So in decisional roles the manager is required to actually uh, take some actions over here, and in these roles he acts as an entrepreneur, wherein he is required to basically create and control changes within the organization, solve the problems, generate new ideas and implement those. So as an excuse me, as a disturbance handler, basically he is required to maintain normalcy, uh, resolve and manage unexpected roadblocks if at all they occur. And as a resource allocator, he is mainly uh, assigned tasks for assigned a task of allocating resources, funds, and assigning staff, etc., to the organizational entities. And more importantly, the word that I'm looking for is equitable distribution of resources. Okay, so this is what he's needed to do. As a negotiator, he tries to pour oil over disturbed waters, um, negotiate with various groups both within and outside of his organization, um, involves direct and important negotiations. Okay, so this is what he is usually doing. And coming to the assignments that have been planned, so I basically gave a reading assignment to the whole class, and I asked uh, 10 people to form and I formed 10 milestones, basically keywords, and 10 people were supposed to make sentences from it. And there was the exercise basically is done in two ways. One, the sequence of the people who will read out or form the 10 sentences into a story would be previously given, and in second instance it is taken at random. So needless to say, when one knows what one needs to say, okay, it takes a very less time, and when it is random it takes not only a longer time, but the story also comes out very shoddily. So this was an exercise to show about um, there needs to be a logical way of doing things in order to make it better. So the group activity that I had also given you was to find a group, or rather find people that you would be comfortable with, and then work on ideas. So anyways, more of this in the later classes. Um, so let's just see, there's an important question uh, that tries to characterize management as science, as an art or a profession. So let's just see what constitutes science. So what is science, right? So a systematic body of knowledge. Okay, so what does it do? Observe by experimentation and verification. So there is no validation without experimentation in science. So what else characterizes or typifies science? So there are various phenomena with cause and effect relations clearly established between the variables, and the principles governing very clear. And if if we are talking of science, then that particular discipline has a systematic body of knowledge, and the methods of inquiry are basically systematic and empirical. That is, the key word here is experimentation and establishment of facts after experimentation. And the information is in such a way that there is the analysis that's being done has an explanation by means of the ordering of the facts, and the results are cumulative and communicable, and what is done say in India can be verified in Australia or in the North Pole or even in the South Pole. So and it is also repeatable. Okay, so these are the characteristics of science. Now yeah, so once it is repeatable, people would naturally accept it, right? So what constitutes, um, how can you say management is a science? So yes, management is also science because there are various principles established by various management folks. It's a systematic body of knowledge. It's a social science, um, because we have, human behavior coming into picture, which is often unpredictable, and you can't actually experiment here the way you can in pure sciences. So I call this, one can call this as an inexact science, because though there are principles that verify the authenticity of the results that have been there, it cannot be repeatable over all the globe. So because of the human behaviors, there's a lot of um, unpredictability or rather uncertainty factor that comes in. And the social science also, uh, one can easily or rather very nicely say that, if uh, one is a scientist, then the decisions are taken based on the results, but as a manager, he needs to keep experimenting, okay, in order to verify his results, make an observation. So experimentation is the key for a manager as well, okay, to validate his understanding. And scientific management is something that was brought in, the term was brought in by F.W. Taylor. There were a lot of principles that were brought in by Taylor and Mary Parker Follett, who started the scientific management thought of management. And management is established by way of a clear logical explanation as to why things are the way they are. Okay, so what is an art, and why is um, an art? So if one is practicing art, then we understand that he or she has a lot of knowledge as to how things are being done. So, and in the process of doing these things, a person acquires skill in that particular area. And in art, one is very creative and one is very subjective. So what one perceives as a horse can be perceived as an exploit by somebody else. So it's personalized in its application. So the media of, and also the media of expression in arts is abundant. There is no limitation, or there is no rigid expressions. So it is totally left to the person who comes up with the application of art, as well as the person who perceives it. So also art is different from management in sorry art is different from science, um, in by way of um, its application being oriented towards practice. One can perfect on their previous results by constant practice, and this is the goal that one has, that they try to achieve a level of uh, betterment, okay, by which they try to convey things. So until they attain that level, they keep practicing, or rather towards that end they keep striving in art. Okay, so management is an art because one needs to be practically using the knowledge uh, to apply the principles, and it's an acquired skill. um, Apologies for the typo there. It is creative and it is personalized. Though there are established principles, the situations are such that uh, one needs to be uh, very subjective in and the discretion is required. So it is personalized in that way, and constant practice makes a manager better at understanding how to apply which principles where. So that's about management as an art as well as a science, but we also know that it is a profession. So how so? So what is a profession? It's characterized by it being a very well defined body of knowledge. There is a formal education and training. There is a minimum qualification required if one speaks of a profession. And for most of the professions, there's a representative body, say the ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, the that's what the doctors. And for engineers, there are many societies. We have the IEEE, the IE, Institute of Engineers, so on and so forth, right? So there are representative bodies. There is a social obligation when one is a professional, that they uphold some morals, etc. And there is a feeling that that is very strongly instilled in these people, that whatever service they do, it is to be held higher than themselves, and they follow a strict ethical code of conduct. They are often required to adhere to this very stringently. Okay, they even most of the professionals are even required to take a pledge or an oath at the time they graduate. Okay, so how is management a profession? So like most, this also is a well defined body of knowledge. There is a formal education often required to elevate the manager to a post, but there is no formal education and training that requires a specified period of time, etc. In fact, a manager need not be as competent or as formally educated uh, like um, uh, his subordinates. So, what elevates him is actually experience here. So, this is where they are different. The training here would be by say an internship, etc., and not necessarily by a university or so. So unlike most other professions, there are no representative bodies here in management. um, However, also, unlike most other professions, management characteristics of profession, management differs in the sense that there is no code of conduct also specified for managers, but they are required to uphold the laws of societies and abide by moral codes to maintain the sacrosanctness of the work that they are doing, but there is actually no code of conduct that they need to abide by. The motto of service is also not imposed on them, unlike in other professions, but it is seriously noted that it has a serious repercussion, that uh, they actually consider that the service is what should be maintained at very high qualities. So that was about how management is a profession. Now let's just have a look as to how administration differs from management. So needless to say, people who administer are at a higher level, and people who manage are in the middle and the lower levels of management. So administration skills, or it basically focuses on formulating policies and determining, the group goals or objectives, strategies, etc. While a person in management, manager, tries to execute whatever is given to him as policies by his higher authorities, and achieves whatever objectives have been chalked out to him to achieve in a given time, etc. While an administrator is focused on determining things and is more into uh, thinking about how to do, how to get things done, A manager's role is more executive and implementing whatever tasks have been assigned. So the scope of an administrator is very, very broad and conceptual, involved in taking major decisions, whereas that of a manager is very narrow and operational within the framework of his department, very narrow. So while administration is best suited to be used in military, education, and other philogenous organizations, management is best suited uh, to be applied in business forms. Okay. So, when one thinks about the factors that affect the decisions of the units, they are mostly external in administration, influenced by instabilities in the societies, politics, labor, etc. But in management, the internal factors affect the decisions more, like the values, beliefs, and the opinions of people, etc., within the organization. The employer-employee relation is that of entrepreneurs and owners as an administrator, and mostly as employees in management. So the qualities required are purely, or rather more technical oriented, in a manager, and in an administrator it has to be more advanced. So thank you for watching. In the next section we will be talking more on planning. Thank you.